Well, hello, everybody. I am back to talk about again adjusting to Excel. Last week kind of gave a part one of this piece. Adjusting to Excel is three parts: rethinking, re-strategizing, and redefining. And so back this week to talk about once again rethinking and that whole process. So I want to just kind of recap what I talked about the last time I was here, and hope everybody has had an amazing day. But the last time I talked about rethinking, and I kind of went through the process of sharing my process, what I've gone through, as a result of these 2 years of a pandemic and just the whole readjustment to life. We've had to make adjustments in every area of our lives, and so for me, I had to take that personal walk. So I'm kind of talking you through the personal process that I took and the steps I took to get to my place of relaunching, re-strategizing, and trying to determine and figure out what it was that I wanted to do moving forward. And I think all of us have had to make that type of adjustment, have that kind of process. But these areas I think are important for making those steps, making that transition. And so I'm just going to do a quick high level overview of what I talked about last week. So I talked about disposition, environment, and posture. Those are three areas, of course, that are important when you are getting ready to make a transition, go into something different, do something new. Your disposition, which is your inherent qualities, your mindset, your character, all of that has to be in a particular place. If your mind's all over the place and emotionally you're just not in a good place, it may not be the best time to try to do this exercise and get yourself on track to go into the next level, whatever that is. So it's important that your disposition is good. That's the power or the liberty to control your direction, your mood, your attitude. So all of that kind of needs to be leveled. Then your environment, where are you doing your thinking? Are you doing that, in a room where there's a lot of chaos, where there is not necessarily chaos, but a lot of talking where you can't really focus? What's your energy level? Are you doing that in your posture? What are you, when you get ready to do the exercise? Are you on the couch? Are you in a slump position? Are you sitting in bed? Are you sitting on a park bench? Are you sitting at a desk in your office? Because all of those things, whether you believe it or not, or know it or not, they do contribute to how well this exercise and this process will work for you. And I know for myself, when I'm in different postures, such as relaxing and that kind of thing, there are things that I can get a little really lackadaisical about the process. But when I'm in a posture that really is conducive and motivates me to think, it really helps with the rethinking process because it helps me to focus. So those were three areas that I talked about last week. And then the other thing was I talked about rethinking avenues. And so, based on your purpose, based on what it is that you've been purposed and called to do, your creativity, whatever that is, I talked about possibilities being an avenue, availability, because all of these are important. Then the opportunities that you have. So opportunities are definitely key. And then your creativity. So you want to always pair your possibilities, opportunities with your purpose and what that looks like. So aligning those things is important. So those were some avenues that I talked about. What are some possibilities of things you can do differently? What kind of time availability, what kind of time are you willing to lend to that particular thing, whatever it is? And then opportunities, are you looking at every opportunity as an open door? It may not be for one thing that you do, but it may be for something else that you do. So you always want to have multiple things that you are open and ready to dive into. And then creativity. Are you just focusing on one lane of creativity, or are you focusing on more than one? Meaning, if you do more than one thing, how many of those things can you do? What's the time and opportunity for those things? And if it's not now, when is it? So you want to kind of prioritize that based on the creativity. So try not to be one of the things that I would hone in on from picking up from where I left off last week in rethinking your avenues. I would definitely, at all costs, try not to be conditioned by tradition. And what I mean by that is so oftentimes based on our age, based on what it is that we did in the past, based on what it is that we feel like we have an area of expertise in, we're not really open to doing something different because we're conditioned by tradition. And so we do what it is that tradition has said is the most likely thing for us to succeed in. Or it's the most likely thing that we would do well, when in all actuality, there may be something else that there's an opportunity that you have the creativity and the gift of that you can also be successful in. So don't limit yourself, but open yourself up not to be conditioned by tradition. And I think that's so important in a lot of areas of our lives, when it comes to corporate, when it comes to being an entrepreneur, when it comes to your creativity, your network, who you talk to, who you connect with. Be open to do some things that are a little bit outside of the box, because that will help you to see those open doors and those opportunities kind of come a little bit more often and a little bit more frequently for you. So I want to kind of talk about for a little bit tonight, just a few things. And then next week we'll go on to the last part if I don't get into that before I conclude on tonight. But just some stepping stones for rethinking. And this kind of starts out where I left off. In addition to not being conditioned by tradition, you definitely, it's an area where you want to be vulnerable. Because when you're rethinking, you're relaunching, you're refocusing on what it is that you're going to do in this season, so much of what we have known as the norm is no longer. There was a paradigm shift that happened early for me, 2020. And it has further advanced in 2021. And now we are full blown into a whole nother dimension of how life is looked at, how we do life, how we handle things. The technology space, the digital space is definitely increasingly growing day by day. And so if you're a person who is not technically savvy, you have to get you some education and learn how to deal with some of the technology that's out here. And that's not to say that you have to learn every platform, but you want to get a couple of platforms that you can be savvy on, and you got to be vulnerable to getting help with that, finding resources that will help you to build on those skills, because it's going to be necessary in order for you, especially if you're an entrepreneur and you're doing any kind of business, really, because you're going to need some type of platform to market, website, some kind of way for people to know where you are and what you do, because so much of what we do is e-commerce now. It's online. And it's digital, and it's some form of social media platform that's involved in those processes. So not that you can't do things the traditional way. Of course, there are people who are doing, but there is such a quicker advancement of moving forward if you are, in fact, and I've talked about this in pen to paper workshops and conferences about, getting yourself out of that comfort zone and coming out of that box and that shell, because it's just the way of the world and how things are moving. So, one of the things when, I realized I have to shift my whole perspective here, and I have to pivot because things have totally shifted. When we first kind of shut down during the pandemic, I was like, okay, this may be 3-6 months and we'll be back on the road, and, we'll be going and doing what it is that we normally do. I think I had a retreat scheduled for 2020. And so, hey, Caroline, thank you for joining. I had a retreat scheduled for that particular year, and then, it just continued, and then life happened. So the next year I had grief, I had death in my family, several persons. And so that was kind of an extended period of time that weighed on the emotions. So those were things I had to take into account, that I had to make some personal adjustments. And then after making personal adjustments, then I had to make some business adjustments. Decisions were made as related to coming out of corporate, going 100% entrepreneur, whereas I had been a parapreneur, meaning I had a business alongside a corporate entity for several years. And so just coming out of that, that whole prospect, I had to rethink and be vulnerable to the things that I wanted to do to move forward. So So you definitely have to be vulnerable. You have to let your pride down. And I'm not saying that, you just step into anything without the proper research and making sure that you vetted what it is that you're going to venture into, but you definitely want to be vulnerable to it. You want to ask for help. You want to get the assistance that you need. And if it's an area that you're not savvy in, make sure you get some assistance with that. Take a course, reach out to somebody, network, whatever you think is going to be most beneficial for you. Then the next thing is focused thinking. And so focused thinking is, determine what vein or what area. This is a strategy as well. And let me parenthetically insert right here that every area that you attempt to move in life requires some level of strategy, because you need to determine how you're going to approach it, what you're going to do, and how you're going to do it. And you have to count the costs. So you have to have a strategy. You just can't go gun-ho into something and not take the opportunity to make sure that there's a plan of action. And so focus thinking is important. And so when I talk about focus thinking, you want to make sure that you have determined what's going to be your vein. So if you got 3 different areas, if you got real estate, you got project management, and say, for instance, you got a bakery or something, then you got to determine which one is going to be the most, number one, that's going to give you the most of a cash surge, when it comes to business or whatever. What's going to be the easiest approach? What's going to be the best approach financially? Which one of those areas is going to be most beneficial for you? So when you think about it, you got real estate. It's going to require fees. It's going to require licensing. So those things you have to pay for. When it comes to, say, project management, if you're going to be a consultant or whatever, what will it take? You at least need a website. You need the proper tools, the proper, computer, digital devices, so that you can properly do the work. And you need the know-how. So in the event you don't have those skills and credentials, you'll need to make sure that you have that. So you'll need to weigh that cost. And then if you're talking about a bakery, well, how do you want to do that? Do you need a brick and mortar, or are you going to do some type of mobile service? What's going to be the best avenue to get you to where you're trying to get to that first goal set? And then, what's the cost of that's going to be? So that gives you some type of idea when I say focused thinking, because whatever avenue you choose or whichever stream you choose, you need to have a strategy for going in that direction. And then you want to then prioritize the other 2 areas so that you have a plan of action. So your focused thinking is going to be on the particular business or entity that you're gonna go for, and you want to make sure that you have the appropriate information to take the appropriate steps so that you can be successful in that area. Because when we, a lot of times what we do is we'll have 5 things or 3 or 5 things, and then we try to go after all 3 of them at the same time, and we feel like we're not getting anywhere because we're trying to spend energy in each area. And now, not only that, we're spending finances for each area. And so we're not seeing ourselves make any advancement. So when you have focused thinking, then you're focusing on that one lane, you get it strategized, you get an approach for it, and then you execute. And then once you have that, and of course, I've heard one person, my coach, say this, and that is, you do each stream until it builds a lake, and then you live out the lake, and then you build on the next stream. So it's important that you have focused thinking in order to do that. And then the next thing that's important is how you do business. So, everybody does business differently, but one of my pet peeves about doing business is that everything about your business and what you do and how you function should be written down. And I call it policy, processes, and procedures. And so policies is what you do. Procedures is how you do it. Processes is how you do it. And procedures are the steps that you take to get it done. So everybody needs to have a structure and an infrastructure for how you do business. Not only how you do business, but who you do business with. That is so very key. So that's important. And you have to make sure that you vet who you do business with. And there's a consistency there about that, and that there's character and integrity and the whole 9 yards. You already know that. And then what has your previous experiences taught you? Because what you want to do when you're doing a thinking process and you're doing the stepping stones to that, you want to make sure that you're not only, vetting out what you're going to do in the future, but you want to kind of vet what you've done in the past, and to just kind of review in your mind, okay, so what have I learned from what I've done in the past? We know that a lot of things that we done in the past, of course, were quite a few things were face to face. We began to, a lot of people were using, of course, online things and events and things of that nature. But online events is one of the major things that are happening now. Most events are online events. And so you want to make sure that you structure yourself in a way that your online event is successful, because there are other elements that have to be in place for an online event versus a face-to-face event. So you have to think about what steps did you take for your face-to-face events, and how successful or non-successful or whatever it was, and then apply those things to where you're going in the future and how you're going to do your online events and what changes and modifications you need to make. Then next, you want to consider your resources. What resources are available to you, what resources are going to be necessary, and not just finances as resources, but also people. Because even with online events, you need to have some help with managing your email list, how your platforms are working, that kind of thing. And even though you may be working a lot of that as a solopreneur, it will be helpful to have help to make sure that things are running smoothly, because glitches can happen and things can happen with online events. And then lastly, I just want to touch on this for tonight, and then we'll pick back up next week. Having the right people in the right places. That's so very important. And it's a lot of what I've done in my consulting, is helping people to really, especially with staff and nonprofit organizations and volunteer teams, is making sure you got the right people in the right places doing the right things, because it's so very important. When you got the wrong person, then that creates problems instead of potential. When you got the wrong place that you're trying to conduct or handle things or deal with certain events or focuses, it can create frustration instead of fulfillment. And then when you got the wrong plan, which is why it's important to have a focused rethinking process, you can have grief instead of growth. And so it's important that you kind of take yourself through these steps, and there definitely may be others, but these are just, areas that I have considered in my rethinking process, and a part of a teaching tool that I've also utilized. And so it's important that you, in your rethinking, make sure that as you're preparing yourself to relaunch or start out on a different venture or a new venture, that you think these things through. You definitely want to, just check yourself. So self-evaluation, self-motivation, and self-determination is going to be an important part of the rethinking process as well, because you want to evaluate where you are, where you've been, where you are, and where you're trying to go. And then you've got to have some self-motivation about what direction you're going in and what it is that you want to do and who it is you want to impact. So you've got to be self-engaged for that piece to take place. And then self-determination. You got to be determined to meet the goal. And so that's going to require your effort. That's going to require, and, this is something else that I've heard quite often recently, and that is, opportunities are not always convenient. So sometimes you have to jump on something, in the blink of an eye. You have to be decisive. One of the things is being decisive. You can't be indecisive and be successful, because sometimes when those opportunities are not convenient, they may not also be financially convenient, not only with your time, but with your finances. So you have to be able to make a decision very quickly if it's something that is a part of your process, your rethinking process, and not only that, your strategy or plan that you may need to jump on and implement at that time. So just some additional nuggets that I wanted to, share with you tonight. And next week, we will talk about a few more things, and then we'll go on to the re-strategizing element of the Adjusting to Excel series. So hopefully these were items that were beneficial to you. Hi, Kaisha. Yes. Blessings to you. Thanks for joining. You can always definitely go back and just kind of listen to some of those points that were shared, but definitely rethinking, re-strategizing, and redefining is an important piece of relaunching in this season. And so definitely going to be talking more about this process, Adjusting to Excel, which is adjustment for advancement. So we have to make adjustments in life. We've got to make adjustments in business. We've had to make adjustments in church, everything. We've had to make adjustments. So it's time now, if you have not relaunched or you're in that kind of slowful state. And I'll say this before I conclude tonight, even for me personally, with everything that's happened and been going on, it's taken a minute to just kind of realign, my energy level and that kind of thing for the direction I wanted to go in, and just put that effort in there, and that's just the reality of what we've kind of all dealt with, in addition to grief and corporate changes and just changes in our country and, the whole disease that's been happening. There has been a lot going on. So what I also want to do is encourage you. If you're not where you feel like you want to be, it's cool, because everybody moves at their own pace. But what I will say is that at some point in time, we have to get up, we have to brush ourselves off, and we have to get us a plan of action together. We have to make some adjustments so that we can make some advancement and we can move forward. So Adjusting to Excel, it's a series. So this is what I'm talking about every week. I may, in fact, do another session this week, but if not, definitely I'll be back next Monday and we'll do another session and we'll go a little bit deeper. All right. Thanks for joining. And in the event you're not able to get back to this page, if you want to review it, this will later be on my YouTube channel. So I'll post that channel so you can go there and subscribe, so that in the event there are other platforms, other sessions that I may do that may not be applicable to Adjusting to Excel, you can always go there and get any of that content as well. All right. Have a blessed night, and we'll talk to you next week.